You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
Hello and welcome to Force 13 Australia's live streaming service. This is the first stream of this nature that we've done for a while with a full team. This is the first stream of this nature that we've done on this channel with a full team. But we're going to be talking about Cyclone Seroja, and we're also going to be talking about 27S tonight, two systems that could potentially impact Western Australia in one way or another. With me tonight is the Force 13 AU director himself, David Tones. I also have with me our Cyclone analyst, our chief Cyclone analyst, Devin Williams. I have Farhan, who's on our Philippines team, and Joey as well, who's normally in UK operations, also joining me tonight. How are all of you doing?
Not bad. Good to be here.
Certainly. So, yeah, I mean, it's all looking pretty good over here. And what we're looking at right now is two systems that have formed recently in the AU region. 27S, which is out. It is the blob that I just circled. It's basically a blob at this point, a sheared mess of a blob there that is on the western portions of things. And then we also have Seroja here near Indonesia, and that has produced some pretty devastating impacts up there. Over 100 fatalities already from that, unfortunately, as absolutely catastrophic flooding has been taking place. Seroja is expected to head towards Australia over the next few days, hence why the stream's here. And it's expected to become rather powerful as it makes an approach. We're expecting Category 4, 175 kilometers per hour, so Category 4 Australian scale system at peak. We just released that latest forecast on the Force 13 Australia Twitter if you want to check that out, but that's what we're looking at right now. So to the team, I guess, just what are your thoughts on Seroja in particular and the potential that it has to bring impacts to Australia?
Well, I think the main thing with Seroja is going to be how it's going to interact with a system to its northwest, which is officially designated by the WMO as 27S. That would be 23U by the Bureau of Meteorology. And what's going to end up happening here is that these two systems are expected to have what's known as a Fujiwara effect, where they're basically going to spin around each other until one absorbs the other. As of right now, it looks like that Seroja is going to intensify rather quickly. It already has. It's already almost to Category 1 Saffir-Simpson scale strength. So it's already gotten itself together rather quickly, getting near or potentially even under 980 millibars. This system to its north and west, 27S. I keep on getting my designations mixed up here. I apologize about that. But the system 27S is also a tropical storm. And it's also expected to get roughly near to that intensity that Seroja is at right now. The only thing is that Seroja is going to be a lot stronger by the time that they interact, and that's going to be somewhere around the day 3 to 4 time span. That interaction, how strong that interaction is going to be key to how close Seroja is going to pass to Australia. Now, most models right now are expecting this system to be fairly weak, and that Seroja will end up interacting weakly with it, and thus pass further away from the Australian coast before potentially bending back towards Western Australia as a weaker extratropical storm, nowhere near peak strength. But that's well past day 5. That's well past the forecast period. If 27S ends up being stronger, the interaction would end up slowing down Seroja more, and what that would allow is the jet coming in from the west to come in sooner, and that would end up pushing Seroja closer to Australia. But again, that would be we would expect impacts in northwestern Australia along the northwestern coast. If they were to occur, we'd be talking about late day 5, day 6 impacts directly from the storm.
Yeah, so the time for impacts is going to be a little bit far out. Looking at the Australian region as a whole, of course we have Seroja, and then to the southwest there we do have 27S. And again, those are going to be interacting with one another, and that interaction will be crucial as to just where Seroja tracks. We also do have, and I just want to touch on this briefly, an area of interest. We have a 30% chance of formation of an area of interest in the Coral Sea forming. David, I know you have some information on that. What's the Bureau of Meteorology been saying on that area of interest out there in the Coral Sea?
The Bureau hasn't got anything via the Tropical Cyclone 3-day outlook for the Coral Sea, but the models are indicating something to the north of New Caledonia up to the Solomon Islands, probably east of Port Moresby. Some of the models have been absolutely crazy, but I note that there is a bit of vorticity, and I'll be looking at that via the other stream. And I just wanted, something's just caught my eye, Thomas, and to the team. The Bureau of Meteorology's Tropical Cyclone Warning Centre has finally issued a track for the tropical low 97S. So that has...
97S, yes, they have. And, although it doesn't seem like they expect to name it. I could only see low icons there.
Where is 27S? I'm sorry, 97S. Where is that?
27S. 27S.
97F?
No, 27S.
27S.
27. Sorry,
27S. Yeah, 27.
Okay, 27S.
Yes,
okay.
Sorry. It does get confusing, but
yes.
The tropical low will remain slow moving over the Indian Ocean, well to the south of the Christmas Island for the next few days. There are no warnings or watches or cancelled zones. At 8 a.m. Australian and Western Standard Time, and the tropical low sustained winds in a centre of 65 kilometres an hour, with wind gusts to 95 kilometres an hour, located within 55 kilometres of 16 decimal 5 degrees south, 105 decimal 3 degrees east. It remains slow moving. Tropical low 23U lies well to the south of Christmas Island, and as mentioned, it will remain slow moving over the next 7 days. However, from Thursday, there's increasing uncertainty in the track and intensity of the low due to potential interaction with the tropical cyclone Seroja, which will approach from the northeast. So they keep it as a tropical low, Devon, for the next 72 hours.
That sounds about right, at least for the next 3 days. It's gonna really be dependent. Day 4 is gonna really be what we're looking at. Like day 3 to 4 is gonna be really important to see what happens with 27S here, because it's really how strong 27S is really going to determine where Seroja ends up going.
Yeah, and of course, the stronger 27S is, the worse news there is for Australia. But
at least in theory, because like I said, we have that trough coming in from the west that should steer the storm towards Australia. The faster it gets out to sea, the more time it's going to take to hit Australia, because they'll have to go out to sea and then curve backwards rather than just shoot straight south.
yeah,
So any interaction with 27S is just going to slow the storm down.
yep. and that's not what we want to see. I do want to compare some forecasts here with 27S real quick, and then we can take a deeper dive into the forecast for Seroja, but we have the Bureau of Meteorology that we've had on the screen for a little bit now. Here's the Joint Typhoon Warning Centers. They have a little bit more movement. They aren't expecting absolute stalling. They're expecting a more eastward movement with time here, and they are expecting some very, very slow strengthening. It should be noted that we have this at around 85 kilometers per hour already, and we're probably going to make a downgrade here at the next fix. But, we could see a little bit of strengthening up to a Category 2 Australian scale very briefly before weakening is expected to begin. And the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has this being all the way down to a tropical low by the time we're about 4 days out. So, much weaker storm there. And then here is our cone, the one that we released earlier today for 23U. Again, Category 2 for a brief period of time. We have it for up to about half a day, and then we see weakening begin pretty quickly as it moves towards. So our forecast is actually fairly similar to the Joint Typhoon Warning Centers, but something to note is just how huge the cone is. And this is because of just how much uncertainty there is with this interaction with Seroja, because it's going to fling this storm around. So we could see this thing being anywhere from having barely moved in 4 to 5 days' time to having been slingshotted into Australia as a tropical low, bringing some heavy rain. We don't really know where exactly this is going to lie, but 23U at this point, very uncertain future. And again, when you have storms developing this close together, it's pretty typical to see a high uncertainty situation, as the interaction is going to be interesting, to say the very least. So now let's take a deeper dive into Seroja here. I'm going to start with our Force 13 cone. This cone was just made about an hour ago, and we're anticipating this to get all the way up to 175 kilometers per hour, so a Category 4 on the Australian scale. It'll be offshore. I think it'll be well offshore. It should be noted that a small chunk of Australia there, a small chunk of Western Australia, is just within the cone, and if you're within the cone, it means there's a possibility of you taking a direct hit. Is it likely you're going to take a direct hit? I don't think so, but there is a possibility that this happens, and you need to be preparing if you're in Western Australia, especially within these regions like Exmouth, those areas. You need to be preparing as if you're going to be receiving a direct hit from this. So that's just stocking up on food, getting water supplies, and again, we're going to have much more detailed and a much more confident forecast in the coming days as to just how big of a hit Western Australia can expect. But right now, I'd start making tentative preparations as if you're going to be taking a direct hit from a major cyclone.
And not just to mention that, but it should be noted that the impacts for Australia might not even come until outside the forecast period. The
Certainly.
Forecast only goes out to 5 days. Meanwhile, more than likely, if this thing's going to hit Australia, it's going to hit Australia on day 6. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and if I draw a little extension of the cone here as to where exactly it would go after day 5, I think this is a pretty good estimation of where exactly it would be going. But again, it's like anywhere along the west coast of Australia, it doesn't matter how far north or south you need to be watching this. And the GFS here, I'm just going to show this real quick, shows, and I'll get a better zoom so that way people can see this better, but it shows Seroja being a very powerful storm, so powerful in fact that even as it's making its extratropical transition, it's making landfall halfway down the west coast of Australia here as a 958 millibar behemoth. So it's still, while it's larger, it's still going to be packing quite a punch. If this run were to verify. So those areas farther south that don't normally see this kind of thing need to be watching this closely, because this could, even if it is extratropical, pack quite strong winds with it.
Note the curve.
This. Sorry, David, you could go ahead.
I was just looking at the curve with Thomas highlighting how it curves back onto the coast, And the Tropical Cyclone Warning Center says that there is a risk that the cyclone could impact the Far West Pilbara or the Gascoyne coast on Friday and the weekend. I think the Bureau will issue and subject to 27S. I think we could see a cyclone watch being issued for the Pilbara and the Gascoyne coast. There's already a strong wind warning in place for some of the WA region. And a special welcome, Thomas, to Tyler and Puffball64. I'm noting your comments. And Thomas, it's back to you, mate.
Yeah, so we've gone over our basic forecast for this. I don't want to go over both the Bureau of Meteorology and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast for this as well, because I think it's important that we get all perspectives on this, especially with how much uncertainty there is right now. I think playing out the different scenarios is definitely important here. And we'll get to questions here later in the stream, but I do want to get through these real quick. So if we take a look next, first I actually want to go over our key messages. We just came out with these a little bit ago, but these are the key messages here. And that is that if you're in Indonesia and you're experiencing flooding, getting to higher ground is very important. Making sure that you're taking preparations there to save your life, extremely important. Over 100 fatalities already have unfortunately occurred from this. If you're in Australia, this is a high uncertainty situation. This is a very high uncertainty situation. But regardless of what happens here, we know high surf is going to be a concern, and we know that rain and flooding will likely be a concern for parts of the Australian coast. There is a possibility... For sure, storm surge as well, yeah. But the other thing is, and this is again a towards a worst case scenario, but people, even if you're in the low impacts, because the low impact zone is what is currently within our key messages here. We only have low impacts, mostly due to uncertainty, not due to the ceiling of this. So the ceiling of this is much higher than what you're currently seeing here. But this storm could make a Category 4 Australian scale landfall, which would be over 165 kilometer per hour winds. So very, very powerful winds there could be heading to Australia, and again, flooding a huge concern. Let's move to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast here. Learmonth, Exmouth, those areas within the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's cone, it's quite large by day 5, the area that could possibly get tropical storm force winds, and it looks like a direct landfall isn't out of the question on JTWC's cone. Definitely a smart decision by them. But yeah, they're expecting a peak there up to 105 knots, so converting that for Australia-related things, that means that they're expecting a peak of 175 kilometers per hour. That's the same that we're expecting, actually, so we have the same general peak there. So there is some consistency, it looks like, with the peak intensity of this, but the location that it's expected to head to is, again, very uncertain. You can see that with our rather wide cone and with the JTWC. So I can't stress enough, if you're in Western Australia, you need to be watching this closely over the next few days, because the forecast, sometimes we say the forecast could change. This is one of those situations where I can all but guarantee the forecast will change. So
absolutely, yeah.
So you need to be watching this, because it's all but certain that this is going to change significantly as we continue to watch the evolution of Seroja and 27S. Excuse me.
I mean, when you take a look at the peripherals, and we'll get to this a little bit later in the stream. When you take a look at the peripherals of the location, like when you take a look at windshield, you take a look at sea surface temperatures, they are good for tropical cyclone development for both storms. Both of them could really spike up intensity really quickly, and maybe even quicker than forecast, which could create a stronger interaction, which will significantly change the forecast shown. Like, not just a little bit, but literally could shift the forecast hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
The thing to take from that is that it could do that, but will it do that? Those are two completely different questions, and we don't really know the answer.
When you're talking about storm preparations, you don't worry about will it do that. The thing is that you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario.
Well, the good thing here is that Seroja has already got quite a bit of media coverage from around the world because of the impact it has done in East Nusa Tenggara province with over 100 dead. It is without question the worst Indonesian cyclone in almost 50 years, with the only one that's worse being the 1973 Flores cyclone with over 1,000 dead. Since then, no storm has gone even close to 100 fatalities. That is until now.
Yeah, it's just a really unfortunate situation going on in Indonesia right now, and yeah, it's never a good thing when a big storm like this receives a lot of press. Like, you think that the storm has the visibility, and that's always a good thing, but at what cost is it at that point? Just 100 people perishing in the system is just never a good thing to hear, and my hearts go directly out to the victims, because that's, you know, we know here most of our team is in the United States, and we know flooding from tropical cyclones can be absolutely awful. I've seen it myself with Tropical Storm Lee back in 2011. At least in my neck of the woods, the storm just rose everything to critical level, and flooding was horrible here. I luckily nobody died, at least in this region, but flooding was really awful. I know people that lost their homes. I know people that, you know, it's just not good. So, and you know, there have been several cyclone events that have happened here in the U.S. that have just brought catastrophic flooding, especially in recent years, with Harvey and Florence and Laura really being at the center of that. So flooding from tropical cyclone, it's catastrophic, and I really feel bad for those people in Indonesia, and you really need to keep them in your thoughts tonight. But yeah, I guess if there is one good thing to take from that, is that the storm's press visibility is increased. However, I don't feel like that enough attention is going to be given to 27S, and I think that may be a problem. Not because I think 27S itself is going to cause direct impacts, but the impacts that it could cause by impacting Seroja's track, it's very important to also mention that system.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We're going to go over to the Bureau of Meteorology's forecast now for Seroja, and this one only goes out 3 days, so we don't get the full 5 days, but you can see here clearly they forecast a Category 3 Australian scale system in 3 days' time, so they're anticipating the same kind of strengthening here. And again, Category 3 still packs a punch. That's 120 kilometers an hour. So it's still a really dangerous storm. Even if this hits weaker than its peak intensity, it's still going to be extremely dangerous. And again, I even showed earlier that the GFS is showing a very powerful system, far from its peak intensity. It's still powerful.
950 millibars?
958.
958 millibars. That's, whether if that's tropical or not, that's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, for sure. And it's still got a lot, basically a central core to it. So I think it's in the process of transitioning at this point during the run. But regardless, that could definitely be an issue. And, you know, that's something that needs to be watched. And again, even if it's not tropical, and even if it's weaker than this, it could be significantly weaker than this and still be extremely dangerous. So, it doesn't matter what the forecasted intensity is, really. You're still going to be getting high surf, strong winds, flooding, storm surge. All of those hazards are going to remain regardless of strength, really, at this point, because I think it's fairly certain that somewhere in Australia is going to get hit, and they're going to get hit by a decently powerful system.
Thomas, I'd just like to draw your attention and the viewers to a possible new area of interest to the west-northwest of 27S.
West-northwest of 27S.
I just posted this in the live output. It's just the cyclone genesis, but the models are hinting of something to the west of, or the west-northwest of the Cocos Keeling Islands.
Yeah, you can see that on Cyclogenesis stuff. We can also look at some models here, and you can see the formation of that on the GFS as well, which is a global forecast model that we like to use. But it's right here, it's this that forms briefly on the GFS, but we actually have, we issued on our main Twitter 50% chance of that forming within the next 5 days. So that is an area of interest that, we're definitely watching closely, and that could, if it lasts longer than it would be anticipated to, that could bring direct impacts to Australia. And the GFS actually has it long-term, about 10 days from now, being right off the coast of Western Australia, just like Seroja's expected to do. So definitely a concern there with that new area of interest. We'll be keeping a close eye on it right here at Force 13 AU, and again, we'll go live again, or we'll have a storm update. We'll have some form of coverage on that system if it does near. But definitely something to watch, to say the very least. So it looks like late season activity is going to be generally on the uptick for the Australian region.
And viewers, Thomas and I were talking yesterday, and I made the comment that the Southern Hemisphere cyclone season is going to finish with a bang. And Thomas is in agreement with me that we're going to see late activity. We still got this month, and we might see the odd one early May. But when we factor in the La Nina, and I should mention that back in late November, the Bureau of Meteorology, in a formal briefing to the Queensland government, said that the sea surface temperatures for the Coral Sea, were above average. And I'm still not ruling out another one or two systems for the Coral Sea region.
We already saw the potential of the Coral Sea region with, what was it, Cyclone Niran?
Yeah, Niran.
Yeah. Niran blew up real quick, and that didn't even come close to reaching the full potential of what can actually be carried in that region, because it was moving at some ridiculous speed, like, I don't know, like 40 kilometers an hour.
It was extremely fast.
So it really wasn't able to get going. But I would definitely be worried about a potential tropical cyclone in the Coral Sea. If something develops there and the shear is right, that's definitely a big concern. Absolutely.
I would be inclined to agree. We do have general agreement from models of an area of interest in the Coral Sea over the next few days. Looks like it's going to be outside of the 5-day mark when we could see something develop. But ensembles have really been keen on something developing with some more extreme cases coming out to around the 20th-ish, showing a pretty powerful storm developing there. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. This could be nothing. This could be significant. Again, uncertainty is sky high, but we're going to be keeping an eye on what's going on in the Coral Sea, because there's definitely an area there that needs to be watched. Speaking of general conditions and things like that, I would like to now move on to the conditions that Seroja is going to be in. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was sea surface temperatures. Those are red hot for this right now. 30 degrees Celsius waters is what this thing's moving into. Those are pretty primed to see a rapidly intensifying storm, and I think that wind shear is going to be pretty good for it as well, although one of the things with these interactions is that they can do really strange things with shear, so I'm not 100% sure how that could influence the storm, but models have shown Seroja will strengthen through that interaction, so I don't think that shear is going to hinder it too much as a result of that interaction. And I don't see much standing in the storm's way over the next few days.
The main inhibitor in Seroja intensifying throughout its life so far has been the fact that it is so close to land, because Timor and Rote Island, which is where the storm has been sitting for most of its life so far, are relatively quite mountainous, and so it does quite inhibit quite a bit the potential of development it has, although mind you, it does not stop it from being very destructive to both of those islands with plenty of fatalities. But now that it has pulled away from all of the Nusa Tenggara Islands, it pretty much really have free space to develop if it wants to. But will it develop is of course another question, with a certain amount of uncertainty remaining over the next 5 days.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's any question that this storm's going to strengthen over the next 48 hours. The real question, big question mark, is going to be after 48 hours, when this thing's probably going to be a Cat 3 or 4 on the Australian scale, and it starts interacting with a potentially 2, maybe even Cat 3 27S. That's going to be the giant question mark right there.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But anyways,
I don't exactly know.
What other conditions are going to be present that are in favor of the storm? Because there's a lot.
Yeah, well, it seems as if the environment is going to be rather moist for it. So we're not going to have much of a problem in terms of dry air, it doesn't seem like. I'm going to just check some other parameters here that we can go over. But yeah, shear is going to be low. We're going to be having 10 to 20 knots over the next day or so, and then it's going to drop to below 10 for like the next 4 to 5. So that's...
wow.
Yeah, so it's going to have really good conditions to strengthen. It's going to have 28 to 30 Celsius, near 30 Celsius from the 7th to the 9th. It's going to have near 30 Celsius. So it's going to have 2 days of less than 10 knots of shear, 30 Celsius waters, and about 70% relative humidity.
Yeah, that's basically perfect for intensification. That's almost exactly what you want to hear for rapid intensification in a tropical cyclone. I don't know if that'll necessarily happen here. It obviously depends on how quickly the storm's able to get a central core. But right now, it's kind of struggling with that. But as soon as this thing gets a central core, it would not be surprising if this thing shot up a category very quickly.
I wouldn't be shocked by that, really, at this point, either. But yeah, it looks like the 3 basic ingredients are looking quite good here. I'm not able to get anything on ocean heat content or the depth of the water, but given that we haven't had a single strong cyclone in this region throughout the entire year, and we've had 30 Celsius plus consistently, I'm going to assume we're going to have a pretty deep waters there.
There was Marian that got to major status on the 7% and hurricane wind scale.
Yeah, you're right.
And also severe cyclone status on the Australian scale. But other than that, yeah, there's been so many systems that form in this region, but really almost none of them was able to take advantage of it, other than Marian.
Yeah, so at this point, we're looking at what seems to be a strengthening storm. Now, I would like to point something out that I found really interesting, and it's the European model. Now, the European model actually weakens this storm over the next few days. It keeps it very, very weak, and then re-strengthens it before it strikes Australia, but it expects the storm to weaken. Now, I'm not exactly able to find out what exactly it has that's different, but it is rather strange to see one of our better performing models showing a weakening system.
That is definitely a little weird.
I will say I think it's unlikely. I think that this solution is very unlikely, but I did think that it was a strange outlier that was worth pointing out.
No, it's definitely worth pointing out. It's definitely a bit of a weird one.
I would be inclined to agree with that. Alright, with that being said, we're going to open it up to questions now. We've talked about things from impacts to preparations to things of that nature when it comes to Seroja. So now, at this point, it's a matter of questions. So, first one, are thunderstorms going offshore in eastern Australia going to turn into that 20% area of interest off the coast there? And the answer that I can give you is that that's going to be a kind of. It's not those storms. It depends. There's one system off the east coast, this low here, just off the coast, that's going to be blazing south. That's not a part of it. There are some on northeastern Australia that are associated with this larger region where pressure is falling. And that's going to be the general region where we're going to see this potential for a tropical cyclone to develop. So are those storms directly going to become the area of interest? No. But the area of conditions associated with those storms is expected to develop into that tropical cyclone eventually. So that's the best I can answer that. So someone says, if 27S becomes the dominant system, becomes the stronger of the two, could that inhibit Seroja's intensification if we somehow got a role reversal where 27 became the dominant?
Yeah, so basically what would happen is that in these Fujiwara effects, because of wind shear, the stronger storms is going to dominate, and the weaker storm's going to absorb it. So if 27S ends up becoming stronger than Seroja during the interaction, then 27S will become the dominant system, and that's going to be tracking pretty much in a straight line towards Australia.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be going out to sea.
No, that would be very bad news. That would be very bad news if that ended up happening. Basically, regardless of which of these becomes dominant, some part of Australia is going to get hit. Right now, it's looking far more likely that Seroja is dominant and will strike some part of the west to southwesterly coast of Australia. Now, if 27S were to become dominant, then we'd be looking at a northwestern Australia hit. So, again, lots of uncertainty here, but I'd say if you're along the west coast from around Exmouth south, you need to be preparing for this storm.
Yes.
Alright, so someone asking, what do we think the ceiling is for this storm? And I'd like to first of all say, this is very important, regardless of how strong it gets, even if it doesn't hit the ceiling, that doesn't really reduce the danger level all that much. This is going to be a very dangerous situation for Australia, I think regardless, really, of wind speed. Now, wind speed, the higher the wind speeds, obviously, the more dangerous it'll be, but I think that flooding in and of itself is going to be enough to drive up the threat level from this anyway, and it's expected to be rather strong. It's probably going to peak out before it hits. It's probably not going to hit at peak intensity regardless of that. Storm surge tends to lag behind the intensity of a storm. So even if the storm is significantly weaker when it hits Australia, the storm surge could still be what it was when it was nearing its peak. So,
and not to mention that, but also storm surge is more directly correlated with the pressure and size of the storm than it is with the wind speed of the storm. So it's entirely possible that it could weaken from, let's say, 170 kilometers an hour to just 120 kilometers per hour. But if the storm's doubled in size and really hasn't fallen in pressure because of an extratropical transition, well, the storm surge is going to be just the same, if not maybe even larger than it was at 170 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely something
So
to watch.
Don't just take the wind speed at face value when you're talking about storm surge effect.
For sure. But now on to the question. I just wanted to preface it with it, regardless of what we say here for the ceiling, if it doesn't hit the ceiling, that doesn't really lower the threat level. What do we think the ceiling is for this? I think it's pretty high.
If we look at purely at the condition of the environment, you could go on a limb and say that it could reach Category 5 on the Australian scale. But of course, there are many other factors and circumstances that could inhibit that. So I guess if you ask me personally, I would say about 180 to 195 kilometers per hour, which is just below Category 5 on. That would be what I say personally.
Yeah, I would be in the same region. I would say 190 kilometers per hour. That's what I can reasonably say right now. Higher probably can't be 100% ruled out, but I think with at least a reasonable degree, I think it can reasonably get to 190 kilometers per hour. Anything higher than that basically requires 27S to be dead. So, we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have, it looks like some news here as the sun's risen over 27S. It is a sheared mess. It is not as organized as it was supposed to be, I don't think. When we saw the sun over it, it looks like it's almost completely decoupled. That center circulation's nearly completely exposed, which means that it may not strengthen much. And if that's the case, then we aren't going to see a huge slowdown, which would be good news. I would like to note, though, there have been a lot of storms that have looked like this that have completely caught us by surprise in the past.
Wilma, probably the most famous of them.
Yes, but there are storms that have looked really bad that have gotten their acts together real quick. So it's not impossible that what trends are currently saying could happen right now just completely gets reversed. And that's true really across anything. Weather-wise, whether it's temperatures, severe weather, tropical cyclones, what current trends are indicating isn't ever a certainty. And so I certainly still think that people need to be preparing for a worst-case scenario, but that's definitely some good news, to say the very least, as the sun has risen over 27S. All right. So someone's saying they believe the ceiling. Yeah, we agree with that ceiling. We just talked about it. High-end Cat 4 Australian with, again, that it could possibly go higher into Cat 5 Australian, but we think it's unlikely. That kind of thing.
Very unlikely.
Yeah.
It would either need to like explosively intensify within the next 48 hours, or it would need to just, I'm sorry, not it, but 27S would just need to go away and die entirely. Like, not just only be a sheared mess, but like completely be erased from existence.
Yeah, we only have a 10 to 15% chance of this getting to Category 5 Australian right now, and that's mostly due to uncertainty. That probability is likely to go down with time as this continues to evolve. We do have a solid 70% chance of Cat 4 Australian, I think 160 kilometers per hour.
That should
Pretty safe.
I think that should be attained within 48 hours, honestly, given the conditions.
Yeah, we're probably going to see that. Category 3 Australians up to 90%, and obviously Cat 1 and 2 100%, because we're already at Cat 2 Australian.
And Cat 3 is literally right around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll likely see that here relatively soon. Someone asking, so is 120 knot Seroja possible? So I'd like to clarify something for some people, because I think we have some viewers who are looking at this and thinking Saffir-Simpson. We're looking at the Australian scale here for things. So when we say a Category 4 is likely, we're not talking Category 4 Saffir-Simpson, we're talking Category 4 Australian. So we're talking the range of about 100 to 110 knots, 115 to 125 miles per hour, which would be Category 3 Saffir-Simpson. That's our ceiling right now. Maybe 130 miles an hour Saffir-Simpson at high-end Category 4 Australian. But no, 120 knots is looking pretty unlikely at this point. Or 140 miles per hour converted to Australian, that would be a Category 5, 205 kilometers per hour. We're not expecting that right now. But yeah, right now we're looking at still a pretty high ceiling, and something I'd like to again make distinct is that regardless of whether this is a Category 4 or 5 Australian, the threat level really doesn't change much. I mean, you're already at an upper end of the scale. You're already seeing very destructive winds. You're already into major hurricane equivalent wind speeds when you get into Category 4. So you're already looking at an extremely dangerous situation no matter how you slice it. But you know, again, it's something that in the meteorology community we do like to talk about, but when it comes to actual impacts, the effects aren't going to be huge between a Category 4 and 5. Both are still going to be extremely dangerous. Right, and if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature, please feel free to ask us, and we will be more than glad to answer them. Someone asking, why hasn't 27S been named yet? So
Australia, the Bureau of Meteorology determines whether they want to name something or not.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think the main reason is the Bureau of Meteorology says it has sufficient winds to do so. We have it at what do we have it at? I think we have it at 85. Yeah, 85 kilometers per hour is what we have it at. Although it's certainly lower than that now. The Bureau of Meteorology has it at 65 kilometers per hour, which is the beginnings of Category 1 Australian, which would be a nameable system. So why haven't they named it? Well, they have a requirement that you need to have a semicircle of gale force or 65 kilometer per hour plus winds. So unless you have that semicircle of those 65 kilometer per hour plus winds, you're not going to get a named storm. And the Bureau of Meteorology looks like they're fully anticipating this to remain a tropical low and not get named. They don't have it becoming a named system on their 3-day forecast. But of course, this could change. We'll just have to see. But as of now, again, they're not anticipating this to become named. But if it does become named, we'll let you know. But that's why they haven't named it yet.
There are news updates from East Nusa Tenggara, both good and bad. Starting from the bad, CNN Indonesia has reported that the death toll has now stand at 128, with 71 missing, and 8,424 people displaced.
Wow.
Which is certainly very, very tragic and very heartbreaking. But the good news now is, because Seroja is now moving away from the Nusa Tenggara Island, the national aid. Basically, now that Seroja is moving away, rescue operation can begin in earnest. Aid has been going, has been done. The aid delivery has been done since last night. It has now started to reach the affected area.
That's good.
Electricity in most of the area that lost it has regained them. The National Electricity Company has stated that 82% of the area that has lost power during Seroja is now back up, and that also the local the provincial police chief for East Nusa Tenggara province has said that he will put all of his personnel in order to help in the recovery operation. That is the latest update from East Nusa Tenggara as to the situation of the aftermath of Seroja.
Well, yeah, definitely tragic and absolutely heartbreaking to hear of the 128 dead and the 71 missing. But it is great news to hear that with the storm moving out, rescue operations are really starting to get going here, and we're going to be seeing people get out, make it out to the other side of this, which is definitely good. It's definitely good to see, and it's something that we're glad to see, to say the very least, with this. But yeah, again, that's heartbreaking. Those 128 deaths, and all of our hearts go out to all the people in Indonesia and those general areas, because that's just absolutely devastating. We do have another question that's just come in. Could Seroja make landfall in Western Australia? Yes. It likely will make landfall somewhere in Western Australia. And could there be an eastern shift, a farther eastern shift? Yes, there could be.
Yes, entirely dependent on the interaction with 27S.
Yes, so we're not going to actually know. And this is the part that this is the worst part for us in the meteorology community with stuff like this. We aren't really going to know where this is going until about 3 to 4 days from now. Is when we're really going to get a better grasp on where this thing's going, and that's not pleasant. And because we want to be able to tell you, yes, it's going to hit here, yes, it's going to have these impacts. We just can't say where exactly it's going to be yet. We can say, yes, Western Australia, somewhere in Western Australia is going to get hit. We can say, yes, there are going to be serious impacts, serious winds, serious storm surge, serious flooding. We can't say exactly where. We can't really get into specifics just yet. We're just too far out, and we're in a complicated situation between two systems here. So unfortunately, there's just too much uncertainty to really get into specifics. But again, we're anticipating 175 kilometers per hour to be the peak intensity of this storm. And so that's definitely a dangerous situation that's going to be unfolding as this heads back south. And even if it hits significantly weaker, even as Devin said earlier, 120 kilometers per hour, still going to be dangerous. And even if the storm's larger, as Devin said, some impacts could be even worse despite the lower wind speed. So you can't take the wind speed at face value with these things. These can be very dangerous even with lower wind speeds. All right, well, we're heading into the final 5 minutes here, so now we're going to get the final thoughts from our team here, starting with David. David, what are your final thoughts, your big message you want to send out to the viewers about what exactly to expect with Seroja?
Well, it's sad to see the lives lost, but the binary interaction between the two systems, I'm wondering whether 27S will reach cyclone status. Meteorology will update information via the tropical cyclone pre-day outlook later on this afternoon, and the threat is there for the WA case. There's already a strong wind warning in place. Also, It's a storm force wind warning for the high seas relating to the cyclone. And I would like to thank the viewers and also Thomas for making himself available. And I should also mention that there is another continuous stream currently operating. It's an automated service. I do come on with the updated information. In addition to the tropical scene, we have this subtropical low off the southeast Queensland coast up to Fraser Island. The rainfall has been phenomenal. I was staring anywhere up to 400 millimetres, but it's eased back. But I'm still under a flood watch. But as we approach the weekend, the picture will become clearer for the two tropical systems.
Absolutely. Devin, what are your final thoughts on this situation?
Can't really say much about the storm yet. Keep a close eye on it. Make your preparations now, but just know in a couple of days, say, I don't know, about 3 days, we should have a better idea where this is going. Just like I said, keep a close eye.
All right, Farhan, what are your final thoughts?
Well, watching the progress of Seroja has certainly been very eye-watering. It is, without question, now the worst Indonesian cyclone in half a century, and that is very tragic. And as for the future of the system for the people of Western Australia, please watch this carefully. Yes, the range is high, but you will be hit in some way. This could either be a manga or a fans. Right now, we don't know, and for that reason, you need to watch the situation very carefully. I know that sometimes people get mocked for making preparation way too early, but at the end of the day, it is better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely agree with that. And Joey, what are your final thoughts?
As Devin said, not much to say at this point. It's too uncertain to give specifics on this, but if you are, as we've said throughout this stream, if you are in Western Australia, do keep a close eye on the system. Regardless of intensity, it will bring some severe impact.
All right, with that being said, my final thoughts on the situation, just a blend of what the team's been saying. We're in a very high uncertainty situation with Seroja right now. Don't get too focused on details right now. When you're looking at cones, when you're looking at forecasts, don't get too focused on the exact locations, the exact intensities. Don't be too focused on any of that. Look at the bigger picture. Where's the storm generally turning? Are you within the cone? Those kinds of things, because we're in a very high uncertainty situation where a lot of different scenarios could pan out, and so we're getting to the point where we're within range, within that 5 to 6 day range, where you need to start making preparations for this. So what I would suggest is that if you're within these cones, if you're within the forecast, regardless of the intensity forecast, just because of how uncertain it is, I'd begin making preparations. Do you need to board up your house and evacuate your home right now? No. But stock up on food, stock up on water, get supplies ready, get emergency supplies, things like that. Prepare to evacuate just in case you need to. Do things like that so that way you're going to be safe in the event that the storm hits. And the other nice thing about doing this now is that even if the storm doesn't hit, let's say, you'll be prepared for when one does. So things like canned goods, gallons of distilled water, wooden boards, things like that. Just things that you can get to board up your home, things that you can get to stock up on food. And my general suggestion is about 2 weeks worth of food and water for each person in your household. That would be my suggestion when preparing for stuff like this, because that'll probably be more than enough. But that, again, that's just my general suggestion. 2 weeks worth of food and water for everyone, and things that you can use to protect yourself and your home from debris, from the strong winds, things like that, and a plan to evacuate in case that's needed as well. Those are the big things from me. Alright, with that being said, thank you so much for watching this stream. We do hope that you enjoyed it. We'll have another one of these coming up around this time tomorrow, as we'll continue to pan out what details and what new things are known at that time. Alright, thanks again.